Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks to Skip and to the Clinton School for inviting us. We always enjoy coming here to talk about the work at the Rep, and it's a distinct honor to be here today. This is an important partnership for the Rep, and we value our relationship with the Clinton School, and we're so glad to be here. I also want to thank Kelly for introducing me. Kelly, as she mentioned, has worn a variety of hats at the Rep, but I can tell you that one of the reasons the Rep is still here today is because of the great work and support of Kelly Ford. And we are more than grateful to everything Kelly has done for the Rep, and we hope that she's back in with us one of these days down the road. But we're glad that she's here at the school now. We have an amazing panel here today to talk about Johnny Cash, to talk about music, to talk about Ring of Fire. And I'll give a brief introduction to our panel here. Some of them need no introduction to Arkansas. Now I've got here on our end Sonny Burgess, and in the middle here is Bobby Crafford. They are members of the Pacers, the legendary Pacers. Give them a warm welcome. Newport, Arkansas, 1955 is where they started, but you know, they've been all over the world. And they had 5 singles on Sun Records. They've had hits. They have played with Johnny Cash, with Roy Orbison, with Jerry Lee Lewis, with Elvis, with Conway Twitty, Patsy Cline, Charlie Rich, and many, many more. They are Arkansans and icons, and we are honored that they are with us today. Also on our panel, starting down there beside Mr. Burgess, is Troy Burgess, who I understand is no relation, but Troy is a member of our cast. He appeared in Nobody Lonesome for Me and originated the role of Hank Williams in that one-man show. He's been in West Side Story on the 30th anniversary production with the original choreography. His stage credits include, and his videos include work with Michael Jackson, Cher, Whitney Houston, Paula Abdul. He's been on Glee, Annie, Cinderella, The Wild Wild West, the new Muppet movie, and over 65 national commercials. And we are honored that Troy Burgess is a member of our cast for Ring of Fire. Coming down the road this way, Jason Edwards and Jeff Lisenby are on our corner here. Jason starred in the Broadway production of Ring of Fire. Rep audiences will remember Jason from Fire on the Mountain, which we did a couple of years ago. He is featured on the original cast recording produced by John Carter Cash. He's directed the production in Southern California at the La Mirada Theater, and last season at the FCLO Musical Theater and the California Center for the Arts. His directing credits across the country include the Actors Theater Louisville, Virginia Stage Company, the Main Stage Music Theater, Chicago's Marriott Theater, the Clarence Brown Theater, Jupiter Theater, and many, many more. So Jason is both a performer and a director. Sitting beside Jason here on my end is Jeff Lisenby. Now, Jeff, it was not mentioned in your bio that you were also a national accordion champion. That's true. I didn't know that. I saw that on your website. Jeff is our musical director for Ring of Fire. Both are performers in the show. So Jason is a performer in the show and the director, and Jeff is a performer in the show and also the conductor and keyboardist and accordionist for Ring of Fire. He was also filled that bill on Broadway. He's performed in Fullerton, Escondido, and La Mirada, as did Jason. He's been the keyboardist for Tennessee Repertory Theater's productions of Grease, Big River, A Chorus Line, Fiddler on the Roof, 1776. He has worked in the business for many, many years. It is an honor to have all of you on our stage today. And, you know, we're here because of the musical Ring of Fire, which I saw on Broadway a couple of years ago. And here it is at Arkansas Rep. And you all know Johnny Cash's obvious connections to Arkansas. He was born in 1932 in Kingsland, Arkansas. When he was 3 years old, his family moved to the Dias Colony, which was a Roosevelt administration experiment, which would be fascinating to think about doing today. You know, it was a farming cooperative, and it was designed to help farm families devastated by the Great Depression. And like all of his brothers and sisters, Johnny Cash worked in the fields to keep his family afloat, and a lot of Johnny Cash's songs reference his time here in Arkansas. I read an Arkansas Times readers poll a couple of years ago, I guess it was last year, that named Johnny Cash as still the most beloved musician in Arkansas. And certainly our production of Ring of Fire opened last week, And if ticket sales are any indication, he is still a very beloved figure in Arkansas, and his music is among the most celebrated in our state. And so to open our 36th season and to open our newly renovated theater, we couldn't think of a better show to open with than Ring of Fire. Ring of Fire came about at the Rep because Jason called me. You know, as I mentioned, Jason had worked at the Rep before. I knew of Jason's work all over the country. And Jason called me up and said, well, how about doing Ring of Fire at Arkansas Rep? So Jason, I'm going to let you talk about that first. You guys were involved in the production on Broadway. Now here we are at Arkansas Rep. Before I ask about the Broadway production, tell me, why did you call me?
Well,
and I think we'll want to talk in the mics.
Well, I think it's you know, it's either craziness or a challenge to want to sing Johnny Cash music in Arkansas, but I thought, what the heck? Tomorrow may never come, so let's give it a shot. But when we did it in New York, we developed the show for a couple of years, and Mr. Cash had given us his blessing, and when it closed, I'd worked in California for a couple of companies, and you know, you start singing Johnny Cash stuff in the theater business, and everything else is downhill for me. So, but the producer out there was interested in the show and took it on, and then said, oh, it's too big and too expensive for me to do. You got to cut it down. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I was like, oh, brother. So, but luckily, I had the opportunity to take the material, and I couldn't add any songs, and I didn't write the show, but they did give me the opportunity to do with it what I saw fit as far as rearranging the songs to make some sort of beginning and an end. I think the main thing was just to try to honor Mr. Cash and the great state of Arkansas as best as I could. And throughout the script, I'll just mention one thing, throughout the script that I had, it always referred to him as Johnny, and everybody's saying Johnny said this and Johnny said that. Well, these guys might be able to call him Johnny, but as far as I'm concerned, he's Mr. Cash. So that's the way we refer to him in the show, and it's really just a tribute to his music, and just being from the South myself, I think it's these kind of shows, I've had the opportunity to present them, and the most important thing to me is just to be honest and true and to honor the people from the roots where I grew up, not make fun of them. They can do that somewhere else, but I refuse to go there. So hopefully you'll get a little taste of Arkansas and Johnny Cash.
And Jason, and you're being modest because you've had a lot to do in the sort of rebirth. Both you and Jeff have had a lot to do with the rebirth. Now, this show began how many years ago? How long have you guys been associated with this project?
2005. So
2005. And it began in a regional theater. The work began in a regional theater in Buffalo. Is that correct?
It began in development in New York, and then Nashville, and then back to New York, and then Buffalo.
Right.
And it was supposed to go out on tour. It did really well up in Buffalo, and it did so well that they said, "Oh, we don't need to go out on tour. Let's go into New York." And
Is that a mistake? Can you guys hear okay?
I think, New York in general is just different. It's hard, especially when you're dealing with the South, A lot of shows that reach that level, they get one reviewer will say it's the best thing they've ever seen, the other one will say it doesn't belong in a barn. So, but what it didn't do was go out on the road and build up an audience that was interested in it. So it wouldn't matter what the critics might have said. And it's happened to a lot of shows. I mean, it happened to Oklahoma when it first opened. They thought it was trash. So, and look, years later, as well as, so, I mean, I'm sure all of us sitting up here, especially these guys, know, you take critics with a grain of salt. Some people are gonna love it and some people aren't. So if you're just trying to stay true to the material and entertain the audience, that's really what matters. you know, the people coming to pay their ticket. It's not some person sitting in office with an opinion. To cut back to your story, we worked on it until 2006, and then it opened there, and from there they've luckily we've got a combination in our company of, I'm sorry, I'm not too good at this if I start repeating myself, of just people who really play this kind of music and understand the material, just a great group of people, plus really brilliant musicianship from my cohort here. So there's a good combination of the well-bred and the and the rough-edged, I would say. So, but we're having a great time.
Let me ask Jeff two questions, Jeff. First, the songs that are selected, and Ring of Fire is a musical review. It's not a play about the life of Johnny Cash. It's a celebration of the music of Johnny Cash. And so, Jeff, tell me, how were the songs that are in this particular production? So many. Johnny Cash, I understand, wrote and recorded over 1,000 songs.
That's true.
How were these particular songs? How do you go about selecting the songs? Are there rights issues? Is it about a flow, or are you telling a story? How are the songs selected? That's my first question. My second question to you is, tell us about the musicians that are in this production, and how do they become associated? How do you get musicians to do this, you know, to do a play as opposed to just being musicians?
Okay, good questions. First of all, we didn't have anything to do with picking the songs themselves. That was Richard Maltby, who originally was one of the conceivers of the show. He went through I think he went through 800 songs of Johnny Cash's and decided which ones he thought could tell a story the most, the ones that were the most interesting. Of course, we had to put his biggest hits in there. That was a no-brainer on that. But then he tried to find some ones that were a little edgier, off ones that people didn't know so much. And so that was his choice. Then when they did the touring version, they changed some of the songs. They put a couple of different ones in there. They cut out some. One of the best songs in the show isn't in the show now, Hurt, which was Johnny's last song. It's not in the show now because Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails, that wrote the song, wanted way too much money to do it every time. So that's really what it boils down to on that. It's a great song, and it is hinted at in the show instrumentally, but it's never played. The lyrics are never sung in the show. So as far as the order of the songs, the order that was on Broadway was completely different than what we're doing now. And then the order in the touring show was even more different. And Jason is really the one who has come up with the new order of the songs. They seem to make more sense. Like you said, Bob, this is not a play. So if you come expecting it to be a play, it's not. It's more like a theatrical concert. We're just doing song after song after song, and our characters change. We're family members one point, and we're a prison guard another point, you know, stuff like that. So we change with the songs. We're not trying to be Johnny Cash. This is not Walk the Line at all. This is not the movie. And part of the problem when this was on Broadway was that this was right after the movie had come out. So people expected it to be Walk the Line 2 on Broadway, and it wasn't. It was a concert of his songs. Back then, it was more like a series of music videos. We'd do Walk the Line, and there would be a music video to that, and we would act out all the songs. Now, Jason has put it in an order so that it kind of shows Mr. Cash's life, and starts with his early farm years and goes through the Grand Ole Opry and the prison years, and then to the concert stage. So he has put it in a very logical order, and I think you'll see that if you come see the show.
Troy, let me ask you a question. Jeff just mentioned that nobody does an imitation of Johnny Cash in the show. Like you would see if you came down to see Always Patsy Cline a few years ago at the Rep, or at Murray's recently. That show is written for somebody to basically characterize the mannerisms of Patsy Cline. And you guys have been real clear about this is not an imitation. You're not trying to do an imitation of Johnny Cash. You sing some of the signature songs of Johnny Cash in the show. How do you walk that line? You clearly have that influence in your mind. You clearly have grown up with Johnny Cash. Tell us about what it means to perform songs like Sunday Morning Coming Down and songs like that.
Well, you walk that line very carefully. Knowing that you have a responsibility to be true to the song, and that people actually want to get a little bit of that Johnny. They want to see it. They want to get a glimmer of it. They want to let that song take them back, or let the experience make them feel like they're actually living it for a moment. So it is a fine line, and we're definitely walking it very carefully, because I don't want to pretend that I'm being him or singing like him or trying to act like him, but at the same time I love him. So to get the opportunity to sing Boy Named Sue or Sunday Morning, let me tell you, I mean, it's the best job I've ever had, because I get to do what I absolutely love doing and what I've grown up listening to, and I get to do it on stage at night for people who actually love it too and want to see it. And so I mean, it's a big responsibility, and I felt a little pressure coming here, I have to say, but I decided to knock that out on one of the first nights. Me and Jason and Kelly went to this bar, and it was research. We were conducting research, and there was an open mic there, and I'm like, I'm gonna get up there and I'm gonna play some Johnny Cash. And
You did from Little Rock, you did this here?
Yeah, we went up to that. It was a couple blocks away, and I had a few PBRs, and I was ready to go. And I said, well, let me just take care of this right now. Let me break the seal. Let me get going. And so I went up there and I ripped off a couple of songs, and the guys there seemed to think I was all right. So I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go.
I didn't know that, actually. Sonny, let me turn to you and Bobby, because you work with Johnny Cash. And so talk a little bit about your connection, and I know you haven't had a chance to see the show. You guys are seeing the show tonight, which is no pressure for you performers at all. But talk a little bit about your experience.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank all these lovely people for coming out, for one thing, and they need to come see the show, because my ex-wife saw it in New York, and she said it's simply fantastic. And she knew Cash back in the 50s when we worked with Cash. And Bobby Crawford and I worked with Cash from 57 through 60 till he went to California. And so I'm looking forward to it. By the way, this is my twin brother, Troy, that was lost. We got separated when we were born. And now I finally got to see him again.
Good to see you, bro.
Thank you. Talking about Johnny Cash, if you want to look in this book a little later, you can see some stuff on Johnny Cash. But this picture was made with Cash in 1957, 58 in California, in Los Angeles. He was doing the Swiss Park is where it's at. And we were opening for him then. We opened for him. That's what we did back in the 50s when Bob Neal was still his manager. And we'd back whoever's on the group. We'd do our little 30-minute show. Then whoever's on the group would come on and we'd back them. Then Cash would come on and do his show with the Tennessee 2. And we did it for like 3 years and never got tired. Told the same jokes every night, the same show. Same clothes. And the only time he had a new song was when a new record would come out. But he was really good entertainer. And I really liked John. I liked Luther and Marshall super well. And Bob Neal, his manager back then, was a good guy. He managed us too. Only thing I need to tell you, go see the show tonight and the next night and whenever, because you'll really like it and you'll enjoy these guys. They are professionals. They don't say they are, but they are. They're professionals. And that's the way they do such a good job on these shows. I don't know what else you want me to add.
Oh, well, and I'm sure we're going to open for questions here in a second, too. But, you know, there's because of the film and you know, when a human being enters kind of icon status, we tend to put them on pedestals and forget sometimes that they're flesh and blood people. And I wonder, how do you feel about you know, have you seen the film Walk the Line that portrays Johnny or Mr. Cash, and do you feel like you knew him, you knew the real man, and do you think that the way his legend is evolving is accurate and correct and appropriate for who he was as a musician and as a man? Bobby, you're shaking your head no, so I'll...
Well, I'll tell you, W.S. Holland, who played drums for him, I asked him about it. He said the only thing they had in the movie right, they had his drums set up right.
All right.
I also asked him in the movie where Johnny kicked his drums, he said he would have never kicked my drums. I'd have killed him. But most of it, what I saw, the part where we were with him, was not right. He was not that type of person at all, I don't think. Do you think
the
that,
funny
Ron?
part is that we never seen his wife, June Carter. In all those 30 years, we never seen her at one of those shows, supposedly the movie. The movie was, you know, they make movies to sell tickets, not to get the truth out. But I also did get to meet his first wife with the 3 little girls. And that was 1959-60 in Memphis. We did a benefit for, well, Cash put together a benefit for Carl Perkins' brother, who had cancer, for his family. And they had tons of stars there because Cash had asked him. Cash was a big star, most people don't realize, in the 50s, probably bigger than he was later on when everybody tried to make a big deal out of Johnny Cash. But he was a superstar back in the 50s.
It was a full house every night, everywhere he played, everywhere we went.
You know, talk about Sun Records and the recordings in the 50s. And Jason told me not to bring this up, but I'm talking about Million Dollar Quartet. The other Johnny Cash, there are actually 2 musicals. This is the Ring of Fire is the one about Johnny Cash's music. There's another musical that involves Johnny Cash as well that was also on Broadway and is now touring. In fact, it's going to be up at the Walton Arts Center later this year, called Million Dollar Quartet, which is based on a true story about, I guess it was in December of 1956 when Elvis Presley and Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash all ended up in the same room at the same time and recorded some music, kind of sort of in an improv kind of way. And that evening was turned into a musical as well, which had success in New York and is now touring the country. And sometime I'm sure Arkansas Repertory will get the rights to it, and we'll do it here in Little Rock too. But Jason, let me come back to you. What is the fascination between Ring of Fire and Million Dollar Quartet? What is the fascination about Johnny Cash on stage? There's lots of famous musicians, lots of iconic musicians. What is it about Johnny Cash that makes for good theater?
Cash had the personality that most of those big stars do. You know, we'll go to Elvis Presley. When Elvis Presley walked in the room, everybody knew it. Well, Cash was the same way. He was not any bigger than Luther or Marshall, but he had that presence, charisma, whatever you want to call it. If you could bottle it, you know, you could make a ton of money. But it was just something about him, and his music was so distinctive. You got to remember that little tic-tac guitar that Luther played, which everybody in the world can play like that because it's not complicated, nothing about it. But it's just something different. And that's what Sam Phillips was looking for. Everything, if you go back to 50s, you know, the 50s music, with Sam Phillips when he was so hot there in the 55 through about 58 till he found other things to do besides mess with the record company. He, every guy he put out was different. And Johnny Cash was one of them.
Jason, you want to add to that too?
Well, I think that Mr. Burgess, everybody can play that, but you guys invented it. So I think with Ring of Fire and $1 Million Quartet, the concept of Ring of Fire is not to have Johnny Cash portrayed, and so we can't change that concept. We can take the material and do with it what we will, but...
And that's what he wanted anyway, you've always said.
Yeah, so, and I think all of us, you know, well, Troy and I both have portrayed historical characters, which is a hard, tough thing to do. And there's impersonators, some great ones. I know Bobby and Sonny know a lot of these guys. They tour with them. I know some. And they do great stuff, but that's not what we're allowed to do for Ring of Fire. So I thought, well, the least we can do is to pay tribute to his music and try to stay true to where he's from and who he was talking about. And if he actually was sitting back looking himself in a movie or on stage of what he was trying to say in his words and the point he was trying to make, and get past that man in black image. These guys knew him. They know I'm sure he's not just an iconic figure that is a rebellious ruffian. I'm sure he had a little bit of that, but we're talking about a real good man from the heart of the country here, the earth. And to get past that image and see what he was trying to say, I mean, he was profound. I mean, what I've learned from just being in this show about what he was trying to say in his words are incredible. You know, but he was also this iconic figure. Now, his $1 Million Quartet, in every right, you know, that's, you know, a great show in itself.
That show is an imitation. That
show
is actors imitating those four stars.
Right.
Another story, yeah.
Right.
So, right, and they do great. So, but we're just dealing with one of the $1 Million Quartet people. So, you know, it's our job just to try to take the material we've got and the concept and honor it and be true to him. And we got some great singers and great musicians, and I hope you fellas like it tonight. I think you will.
Well, one of the things that when the show came to Little Rock after having been in California, because it had its Broadway run, then there was the question, what life will this play have in regional theater? It was a big production on Broadway in terms of cast size. I know you guys boiled it down to its essence and recruited musicians from Nashville.
Well, around the country, what we've tried to do is, you know, luckily when we first did this version, Bob, out in California, Jeff and I both thought, well, for one thing, we had to find players out there because the producer didn't want to fly all these guys in and put them up in a hotel and give them a car to drive. Luckily, we found some of the best players who knew this kind of material. You know, we've got Brantley Kearns playing fiddle, who's a great actor, also from North Carolina, played with Dwight Yoakam's band. He's the real deal. We got John Marshall playing doghouse bass, who's the renowned Southern slap doghouse bass player in Southern California. We got Jeff Listenby here, who's probably the best musical arranger and conductor in Nashville. How blessed are we? You know, so and Jeff and I were talking, it's bigger than us. But what we've tried to do with the music, now you got me on this thing. I'm obsessed with this show, you know. What we wanted to do is take the Broadway arrangements that we felt were valid and good there, but we've tried to strip it back to get more of that Sun Studio sound when we can. There's some Broadway music in it, arrangements of his songs, because it is a show and we're trying to bridge scenes together. But whenever possible, we wanted to get back to the true the true sound of the music, and I think we've got the players to do it, as well as the story. Did I get that right, Jeff?
Let me open up for questions, see what you guys want to ask about. Sir. And do we want to do the microphones? Hang on one second, sir, and they're going to get you a microphone.
Troy talked about playing to an audience and a house full of people that are there to hear the music and really enjoy it. But Sonny and Bobby started out, and there wasn't always that type of an audience. I wonder if you could talk about some of those roadhouses up in Highway 67 in Jackson County, and that time Johnny Cash came in with Elvis at Bob King's.
Do what?
I want to know about some of the roadhouses
he
y'all
won't know about
played.
that.
You don't want to know about Swifton and Newport? Johnny Cash first appeared in Newport along with Warren Smith, Eddie Bond, and Roy Orbison in 1955 at the REA had come into town, and they threw at the football field, Newport High School, they threw a big deal where they give away washers, and y'all probably seen those, everything else, you know. And they filled the bleachers up, the football field there. And that night, everybody except Cash. Now, Cash and Martha and Luther and Marshall went back to Memphis. They didn't want to come out to Silver Moon, but we were playing out Silver Moon. So Roy Orbison and the Teen Kings came out, and I don't think Warren Smith did. Eddie Bond, no, I didn't. Anyway, that's where we first met Roy Orbison. Then I saw Johnny Cash earlier in the year at Bono, Arkansas. Elvis played the Bono High School, and I went over to see and Johnny had just had a release, and he opened for Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash opened for Elvis. Anyway, they had the uniform back then was a white shirt, little black bow tie, and that was it. Elvis always wore a sport coat, but the rest of us didn't. And but then in the latter part of 1955, Swifton High School hired Johnny Cash to come up and do their high school reunion along with Elvis. And then it was a great show. Anyway, we were opening for him down at Bob King's. Have you ever been to Swifton? Bob King has had jillions of artists play, like it's a rock and roll highway, 67, which has been designated. I think Skip Rutherford had something to do with that. Anyway, after they got through, we opened up at 9 o'clock at Bob's. At 10 o'clock, Cash and Luther and Marshall shows up, and they do their show. Then by that time, Elvis is here, and he goes on and does his show. I'm standing back there with Bob Neal, and we're talking, and Cash comes up, and he says, Bob, we're going to go back to Memphis. These folks don't want to hear us. Which they didn't. They was there to hear Elvis. And it was jam-packed. It held 300 people, and there must have been 500 in there. So they went on back to Memphis, but later on, Cash began to get more popular. And we finished up the night, and then all of a sudden, Scotty Moore comes back up on the guitar, puts his arms around me, and we're playing the guitar, two guys playing one guitar. By this time then, Bill Black's done come back up, then Elvis comes up. And we had a jam session from 1 to 2 o'clock, and I've only met one person through the year in Walnut Ridge. He was there he remembers the jam session. There were not many pictures made, but Johnny Cash at Swifton and all was always good. It is just that fact. Elvis had him in the palm of his hand. We opened for him 4 times in 55. And that last show in 55, December 55 at Swifton, 3 months later, he had signed with RCA Victor. Colonel Parker took him over, and Bob Neal still had Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and the rest of us to manage. But the rest is history for Elvis.
So Johnny Cash and Elvis played a high school reunion.
At Swifton High School.
I'm absorbing that.
Back then, you remember back then, that was the biggest spot around the school and maybe in the whole town.
Right.
And they'd stick them under the basket. We've got pictures at the Newport's Rock and Roll Highway 67 Museum. We've got pictures of Elvis standing under that goal. So if you folks, you need to get up to Newport this Saturday. We've got Depot Days. with Ace Cannon, who was all up and down that highway. We've got us, the Pacers. You've got J.M. Van Eaton, who played drums for. In fact, he was the first drummer on the Cash record. It's Sun Records. He played drums on, I don't remember what song. He'll tell you about it Saturday. We've got the Georgia Satellites are going to be there. Travis Womack, who's one of the world's best guitar players, played on all the soul music out of Muscle Shoals. We've got, who else we got, Bobby? Oh, Stunning Cunning from Memphis, Tennessee, by the way of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You got to see this show. He's got a red suit, and I'm telling you what he does. He's wild, boy. He's got a good band.
Sir.
Okay, enough commercials.
No, I'm going to get to the other commercial in a minute, too.
Hello. My friend Phyllis Brand and I have a question. Sonny?
Go ahead, sir.
Sonny, can you hear me?
No, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Hello?
That's better.
My friend Phyllis Brand and I here have a friend who happens to be a mutual friend of yours, a guy named Tommy Choate, Tuckerman, Arkansas. Tells a story that before you became famous, mine's a two-part question. Before you became famous, there were two pianos in Tuckerman. One was in the Baptist church, and the other one was at his parents' home. It was unheard of you being able to play the devil's music in the Baptist church. Bobby, you were in that group, weren't you? Anyway, you practiced at Tommy Choate's home. Can you confirm that as a true story?
Yes, sir. When Kern Kennedy and I started out back in 1949 and 50, we would go to Tommy Choate's house. He was our drummer. He had a set of drums set up, and he also had a big piano. The only place Kern could find a piano was in the church or somewhere like that. Kern Kennedy is still with me, by the way. 56 years later, he's still playing piano. He don't get around as good as he used to, but he's getting old, I think. I'm not understanding.
I don't think we heard what your question was. Just say your question again. We couldn't hear you.
Silver Moon, they burned down. Got too hot.
Talking about, you must have been in the Silver Moon. By the way, the Silver Moon was where everybody played. We had the Dorsey Brothers Orchestra came through, Glenn Miller orchestras, tons of big bands came through there and played. What's his name, the horn? Louis Armstrong was there in 1952. Also Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. So up and down that little rock and roll highway, 67, there'd been more good artists come through there and play than any place in Arkansas, or probably Memphis or anywhere else around. You just could not believe it. It was every week, somebody. But we were lucky. The Pacers, we got to play there every Saturday when we didn't get paid to go somewhere else.
Sir.
The last time I saw Mr. Burgess, he was complaining at the Silver Moon, that elegant club, about his bucket having a hole in it. I wonder if he's got a new bucket or patched that hole.
We hadn't patched that hole yet, thank goodness. It's still playing. I got it off of Hank Williams when we recorded it, Son. Jack Clemens actually plays the guitar on it, the rhythm guitar, the flat top. But we got it off of Hank Williams in 57, came out in 56, 57, Ricky Nelson, who loves Sun Records, he covered it. Then a few years, 96 or 7, we did The Good Rockin' Tonight. Plant and Page recorded it. Well, thank you, appreciate that.
Question over here.
My time.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk to Sonny. You're talking to an old boy that met you at the Altroff High School ball games back in the early 50s. You remember coming to Altroff, Sonny? Altroff?
Altroff?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I met you long before you were famous. I'm proud to see you again.
Yeah, that's right. I played baseball way back.
Right.
And I wish I still could, but I can't. Trough, Arkansas. That's a great place. They used to be the best bunch of people that would come to the Silver Moon,
Well,
Porgy's Rooftop,
yeah,
Jarvis's. I don't think they got up to Swifton as much, but
Swifton burned down.
you could count on about 50 or 60 of them. And it started more fights than anybody else in the building. I think you were the ringleader.
What other questions can we answer? It's kind of like a reunion so far.
He said he thought he was fighting, but his hands got stepped on while he was crawling around.
Let me ask a question about one of the things that's prominent in this show, in addition to the songs that we associate with Johnny Cash, is the gospel influence. And there is an incredible through line of gospel music in the show, and we know that that was an important part of Johnny Cash's life, and I assume it was an important part throughout his career. And so, Jason, you want to speak to the influence, the gospel influence in this show is so important. Talk about the evolution of that. Has that always been a part of the show? Was that a part of the show on Broadway too, the gospel? Was that a big part from the beginning, or has that been added as the show has evolved?
One thing that these guys were talking about, the movie, which I don't think they touched on, was Johnny, with Mr. Cash's spiritual side, obviously growing up, you know, the way he did, and learning to sing and playing the guitar from his mom and listening to hymns, which I can certainly relate to. So thank God there's these kind of shows that gives me an opportunity to work, because some people think that I'm cut out of the same cloth, though not anywhere near that level, but I think they know that I appreciate it. But I don't think they touched on that in the movie. I mean, he was very, very spiritual. He sang at the Billy Graham evangelistic, you know, he'd go out, he and June would go out and sing with Billy Graham and at his crusades regularly. And like all of us, pretty much in this show, you know, we learned to sing from being in church and, you know, sitting in that Baptist church. For me, it was in the North Carolina mountains, but you know, learning the same songs. And I think in New York, one thing that Richard Maltby, who is a born and bred New York Tony Award-winning director that knew very little about Johnny Cash when they took this project on originally, he didn't steer away from that spiritual stuff. He did. And so I have to give him credit, because a lot of times in a place like New York, you know, you just don't go there. In fact, when we were going to do the Today Show on NBC, when we were in New York, and we'd been doing Will the Circle Be Unbroken for a lot of promotional stuff around the country. NBC came to see what we were going to choose to play on the Today Show that morning, and they wouldn't allow us to play Will the Circle Be Unbroken. They didn't want to offend some of their audience out there. And right then I was like, well, what would Mr. Cash say? And you know, it's on his records, and they still have, where I'm from, where I grew up is about 45 minutes from the Carter fold, which is where A.P. Carter and June Carter and Maybelle, or they still have concerts up there near Bristol, Tennessee, which is just over the mountain from where I grew up, near Asheville, North Carolina. And I know they're singing gospel up there every night. So I think what happened in New York was, you know, they were afraid of it. They were afraid to stay true to it. And I think one thing that in the short amount of time we've gotten to do this version is we refuse not to be true to it. So, you know, we don't need to go to New York. Let them come to us. If we're true to the material and we're true to what these guys were doing back then, obviously they had something going on, because look how popular it still is, more now than ever, and most of the big guys are in their grave. So let New York and LA come to us. We don't have to go. We don't have to do what they want us to do. Let's stay true to the material. And if we want to sing, one thing that we did do, can you tell that I'm pretty much totally into this show and this subject? One thing, I'll tell you one short story and I'll shut my mouth. When in the structure of this show originally, it had, there's a little scene with Mr. Cash's brother Jack, who passes away, and I thought, well, you know, it needed a hymn in there of some sort, and I was thinking back about what my grandmother sang, and her favorite song was "Farther Along." I don't know if y'all have heard that here in Arkansas, but I thought, well, what about "In the Sweet By and By"? And I thought, well, you know, I thought about a few of them, and I think I even called Jeff, and I was like, what do you think about that? And he goes, yeah, that's, you know, that's a good one. And so I thought, okay, well, this is a good place to put this in this scene, and lo and behold, I wanted to have something Johnny Cash had recorded, and he had recorded it. Then later I found out that they actually sang that song at Jack Cash's funeral right out here in Arkansas, and I thought, this is bigger than me.
Well, you know, to me, when you asked about the movie earlier, he was shown in the movie as a bad person, was my indication. He was not. And, you know, we did a show last week in Green Bay, and we closed the show. What did we close the show on, Sonny? What song did we, the last song that we did for the night, we brought everybody back on stage.
Will the Circle Be Unbroken?
We did Will the Circle Be Unbroken.
Well, in Elvis, too, you know, he had a hymn on it about every one of his songs, or his albums, and we all know Mr. Cash went to Sun Records saying he was a gospel singer, and Sam Phillips said, well, you're in the wrong place, boy. And then when he got old enough, and when he got successful enough to do it, I'm sure you guys know that he was singing gospel music. He continued to, and even late in his career, he recorded all gospel, and so did Elvis. And I bet you guys know a gospel tune or two too, don't you?
Well, I've recorded 3 gospel albums.
There you go.
Not.
Well, there's.
But every artist that come through this part of the country back in the old days, that always have gospel songs. So that's nothing new for us here in the South. It's pretty well a Southern, at least I think so, maybe not. You got different places, but for us, when they'd come in and do the shows, and they'd always have a gospel tune or two in there.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, everybody knows about Mr. Cash being the rebel and all that, but what we try to do in 2 hours is to try to cover a little bit of all aspects of you know, who he was and what his music was trying to say.
We can take one more question. Yes. She's behind you. There it is.
Okay, I'll try to make it a good one. My name is Hillary. I'm a Clinton School student. Thanks for being here. I saw your show on Sunday, and I enjoyed it. I don't want to keep bringing up the movie, but it's a lot of what people know of his life, unfortunately, is based on that movie. And there are a lot of themes that come out in the show, like the romance and the drugs are even alluded to, your show. My question is about his relationship with his father, actually, and how that's such a strong theme in the movie. And I know the movie isn't necessarily true to life, but that's not touched on at all in your show, and his childhood actually seems, outside of the tragedy of Jack's death, pretty happy. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that, and what the truth really is, if you know, and if you can enlighten us a little bit.
Johnny's relationship with his father. With his father. We never met him, did we?
You know, with the people that I've talked to,
I don't think Johnny Cash wasn't a bad person. So as far as his relationship was probably like most of us born in the country, which I'm in Newport, born out there in the sand. Your daddy was the father figure, and if he wanted to beat your butt, he did, but you stayed straight. So I think that's simply, well, I think his relationship with his dad was good.
I never heard anything bad.
And Jason, is there, in terms of the structure of the show, was there any conversation about that? I know that there's one moment that features the father. Was there any additional conversation about that?
well, I mean, before we came out here, we were talking to Mr. Crawford, Mr. Burgess here, about, you know, all the substance and drugs and that everybody, you know, well, you know, yes, he did go through that period, but you know, it's popular just to, that's you know, bad news sells. So what, but they're saying when they were around him, he wasn't drinking, he wasn't, you know, he wasn't drugging, you know, so that's not the only aspect of his life. But what I've heard from his daughters and his son, that those portrayals were not real accurate in the movie. I think they enjoyed the movie for, like these guys said, it's Hollywood, sells tickets, and there's a lot of truthful things about it. I enjoyed the movie. I thought Joaquin Phoenix was, you know, spot on.
Brilliant, yeah.
But, you know, as far as the story goes, I'm sure there was some truth to it and some Hollywood to it. So,
well, and you know, we're gonna have to wrap up now because our time is at an end. I know, Sonny, I know you guys have a festival, not just the one this weekend, but one on May 12th as well, that we're all going to look forward to and we're all going to take advantage of. And I want to thank our panel. I know that you guys have traveled to join us, and our performers all have a show this evening and had one last night, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity to speak with all of our panelists today. And I also want to thank the Clinton School for making this forum available for us to talk about Ring of Fire, which is playing for the next 3 weeks at the Rep. I hope you will come and see it. And it has been a distinct honor to enjoy, learn about, and come to experience the music of Johnny Cash through these wonderful performers who both worked with him and who recreate his work on stage at the Rep every night. Thank you all very much for being here. Skip, I don't know what you want to say.
Let me say one thing. Aren't we lucky in Arkansas to have the Arkansas Rep and Bob Hupp? And go to Depot Days, because prosecuting attorney Henry Boyce of Newport is singing at Depot Days. He's singing this weekend at Depot Days. And does anybody remember Johnny Cash coming to Fayetteville to campaign for Win Rockefeller when he ran for re-election for governor? He did. I saw him in Fayetteville. Thank you all for coming.